always thought I was a good person. I really did. I volunteered at the library. I remembered everyone's birthdays. I made a point to ask the grocery store cashier how her day was going. I was a good daughter, a reliable friend, and I believed wholeheartedly that I was a good wife. That's what makes this so much harder to tell. The story of how I unraveled and how my husband David, the quiet, steady man I'd taken for granted, engineered the most perfect, devastating revenge I could ever have imagined. My name is Clara, and David and I had been married for 15 years. We built a life together, a comfortable, predictable life. He was an architect, a man who found beauty in structure and stability. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. Our life was a series of pleasant routines. Coffee together in the morning, a kiss goodbye, work, dinner, a movie on the weekend. We had a nice house, 2 cars, a golden retriever named Barney. From the outside, it was idyllic. And for a long, long time, it was enough for me. But then slow, insidious boredom began to creep in. The silence at dinner started to feel heavy instead of comfortable. His predictable jokes stopped being endearing and started feeling like a script I'd heard too many times. I felt like I was living my life in grayscale, and I started craving color. That's when I met Leo. He was a new client, a writer who needed a cover designed for his first novel. Our initial conversations were professional, but they quickly bloomed into something more. He was everything David wasn't: spontaneous, effusive, full of grand romantic ideas. He spoke in metaphors and saw drama in everyday things. To me, who felt stuck in the mundane, he was a lightning bolt. Our emails became longer. Our text messages started arriving late at night. He made me feel seen, heard, and most dangerously, exciting again. The affair started emotionally, long before it ever became a physical reality. I told myself it was harmless, just a friendship that filled a void David had left empty. I convinced myself I deserved this spark of happiness. The first time I met Leo for coffee, under the guise of a client meeting, my heart hammered so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. The guilt was a physical weight, but the thrill was stronger. I became a master of deception. I invented freelance projects that required late-night brainstorming sessions. I became careless with my phone, leaving it face up on the counter, a ticking bomb of secrets. David, ever trusting, ever steady, never suspected a thing. Or so I thought. He'd ask about my day, and I'd spin elaborate lies about difficult clients and tight deadlines, all while his calm brown eyes watched me. I was so wrapped up in my own drama and the delicious tragedy of my secret life that I failed to notice the subtle changes in him. He became quieter, more observant. He started working later himself, claiming a big new project had landed on his desk. I was so relieved he was busy, so absorbed in my own world that I didn't question it. The physical part of the affair with Leo was brief. A handful of stolen afternoons in a bland hotel room on the other side of town. It was never about the physical act, not really. It was about the anticipation, the secret texts, the feeling of being someone else, a woman in a story, not a wife in a predictable marriage. But with each secret rendezvous, the guilt began to eclipse the thrill. The lies started to taste bitter. I'd come home and see David reading on the couch, Barney's head in his lap, and a wave of self-loathing would wash over me. He'd look up and smile, a simple, trusting smile, and I felt like the worst person alive. I decided to end it with Leo. The fantasy had curdled, and the reality of what I was doing to my husband, to our 15 years, was becoming unbearable. I met Leo one last time at our usual hotel. I told him it was over, that I couldn't live this double life anymore. He was angry, calling me a coward, but I held my ground. I drove home that day with a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. I felt clean in a way. I had done a terrible thing, but I had stopped it. I would work on my marriage. I would find a way to fall in love with David again. I would be the wife he deserved. When I walked through the door, the house was spotless, as always. David was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air. He turned and gave me that same steady smile. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice even. "I have no idea," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I was ready to confess, to beg for forgiveness, to start the long, painful road to redemption. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked towards me. For a moment, I thought he was going to hug me, to offer the comfort I desperately needed, but he stopped a few feet away. His expression wasn't of anger or sadness. It was calm, a deep, unsettling calm. He said, "I know, Clara. I know everything." My heart stopped. The world tilted. "David, I can explain. I ended it today, I swear." He held up his hand, stopping me. "You don't need to explain. I've had a front row seat to the entire performance." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he brought up an audio recording app. He pressed play. My own voice, bright and laughing, filled the room. And he said my eyes were like a stormy sea. It's cheesy, I know, but it's so romantic, don't you think? It was a conversation I'd had with my best friend Sarah in this very kitchen, confessing everything to her while David was supposedly at work. I stared at him, my blood running cold. You recorded me?" "Not just that," he said, his voice still terrifyingly placid. He opened a photo album on his phone. There were pictures of me and Leo. Not the salacious kind, but damning nonetheless. Us walking into the hotel, us having coffee, my hand resting on his, time-stamped, dated. A meticulous record of my betrayal. "How?" I whispered, my legs feeling like they might give way. "The new home security system I insisted we get 3 months ago," he said. "The audio sensors are remarkably clear. And the big new project at work? It was you, Clara. My project was you." He hadn't yelled. He hadn't cried. He had simply observed. He had gathered evidence with the precision of the architect he was, building a case against me, brick by brick, lie by lie. And in that moment, standing in our perfect kitchen with the smell of our dinner burning on the stove, I realized the terrifying truth. My affair wasn't my secret tragedy. It was his design, and the performance was far from over. This was only the end of the first act. The silence that followed his words was heavier than any argument, any slammed door could ever have been. David simply turned off the burning stove, placed the pan in the sink, and walked into the living room, leaving me standing there frozen in the epicenter of my own ruin. I expected him to pack a bag. I expected him to demand I leave. I expected the roaring fire of a confrontation, something I could fight against or beg forgiveness for. But David didn't do any of that. He simply sat in his armchair, picked up his book, and began to read. That was the beginning of the true punishment. The revenge was not in the discovery, but in the aftermath. He didn't give me the drama I had come to crave. He gave me nothing. He moved through the house like a ghost, a polite and distant roommate. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped telling me about his. He slept in the guest room. And when I tried to protest, to plead for a chance to talk, he just looked at me with that infuriating, unreadable calm and said, "There's nothing left to say, Clara. You said it all. I just happened to be listening." For weeks, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I was desperate for a reaction, anger, tears, anything that would make him seem human, that would give me a crack to wedge my remorse into. But he was a fortress. He went to work, he came home, he cooked dinner for himself, and he ignored me. I was a ghost in my own home. I tried to apologize, my words tumbling out in messy, cheerful waves. He would listen, nod, and then ask if I had taken Barney for his walk. He was erasing me piece by piece, not with violence, but with sheer, utter indifference. I thought the worst was the silence. I was wrong. The worst was when he started being nice. It was a month after the revelation. He came home and announced quite casually that he had booked a trip for us. A trip? I echoed, stunned. Where? Why? It's our anniversary next week, he said, his tone as neutral as if he were commenting on the weather. 15 years. It seemed a shame to let it pass unmarked. I've booked a week at the Lakeview Resort. We went there on our honeymoon, if you recall. I did recall. It was a beautiful, secluded place up in the mountains, all rustic charm and stunning views. We had been so in love, so full of plans. The idea of going back there now, with this chasm between us, felt like a form of torture. But a tiny, desperate part of me saw it as a chance. A week away from this house, from the reminders of my betrayal, perhaps in that romantic setting, we could finally break through this wall. The journey was quiet. He drove. I stared out the window. When we arrived at the resort, it was just as beautiful as I remembered. The same log cabins, the same crystal clear lake, the same majestic pines. But it felt like a museum of a happiness that was extinct. David checked us in, all smiles and pleasantries with his staff, then turned to me with the same empty pleasantry. He was performing, and I was his unwilling scene partner. The first 2 days were a repeat of home, just with a prettier backdrop. We took polite walks, we ate meals in near silence. I was fraying at the edges, the tension unbearable. On the third evening, we were sitting on the porch of our cabin, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and purple. The silence was finally too much for me to bear. David, please, I begged, my voice breaking. Please, just yell at me. Tell me you hate me. Anything is better than this. This nothing. He turned to me, and for the first time since that night in the kitchen, I saw a flicker of genuine emotion in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, more calculating. I don't hate you, Clara, he said. Hate would mean I still care. What I'm doing isn't about hate. It's about balance. Balance? What does that mean? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked out at the lake. Tomorrow, he said, we're having company for lunch. Who? A small, tight smile touched his lips. You'll see. The next day, I dressed with a nervous anxiety I couldn't place. Who could he possibly have invited? His brother? A marriage counselor? We were seated at a prime table on the restaurant's terrace, overlooking the water. The sun was warm, the setting was idyllic. And then I saw him. Walking across the terrace, being led by the host, was Leo. My world stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Leo looked as handsome and careless as ever, but also confused. He spotted us and his steps faltered. David stood up, a picture of gracious hospitality. Leo, so glad you could make it, David said, shaking his hand as if they were old friends. I've taken the liberty of inviting you. I've been so curious to meet the man your wife finds so stimulating. Leo looked from David's calm face to my horrified one. David, I don't know what to say, he stammered. Oh, don't say a thing, David said, holding a chair out for him. Let's just have a pleasant lunch. Clara has told me so much about you. Well, she told Sarah. And well, you know how that goes.
The lunch that followed was the most exquisitely painful hour of my life. David was the perfect host. He engaged Leo in conversation about his writing, his travels, his opinions on everything from politics to wine. He was charming, witty, and utterly terrifying. He never once mentioned the affair directly, but he wove subtle, razor sharp references into the conversation that only Leo and I would understand. He mentioned the hotel chain we'd met at, commenting on the quality of their pillows. He talked about the importance of good character in a protagonist. I sat there, my food untouched, my face burning with a shame so profound I thought I might dissolve. Leo was squirming, giving short, uncomfortable answers. He was a man who thrived on drama, but this was a kind of psychological warfare he couldn't comprehend. Finally, David put his napkin on the table. "Well, this has been delightful," he said, his voice warm. "But I think we should be going. Leo, I've taken the liberty of settling your bill for the lunch. Consider it a thank you." Leo looked up, bewildered. "A thank you for what?" David's smile didn't reach his eyes. "For showing me in the clearest possible way exactly what my wife is capable of, and for making it so easy to document the private investigator I hired was quite complimentary of your lack of discretion." Leo's face went white. He looked at me, a flash of anger in his eyes, as if this was my fault. He stood up without another word and walked away, a defeated man, scurrying from a battlefield he never knew he was on.
I was trembling. "Why?" I whispered to David, tears streaming down my face. "Why would you do that?" He looked at me, and the mask of pleasantry finally fell away, revealing the cold, hard steel beneath. "You wanted a reaction, Clara. You wanted to feel something. I wanted you to understand the depth of my research, and I wanted you to feel, just for a moment, a fraction of the humiliation I felt listening to those recordings. This wasn't for him. This was for you." He stood, tossed a few bills onto the table, and looked down at me. "The car leaves in 10 minutes. Don't be late." He walked away, leaving me alone at the table, surrounded by the stunning beauty of the lake and the complete desolation of my soul. I had thought my affair was my secret. I had thought confessing would be the hard part. I was wrong. This was the hard part. This cold, precise, and utterly public dismantling of my world. And as I sat there, a terrifying thought took root in my mind. If this was what he did in public, what did he have planned for when we went home? The revenge was not over. It was only just beginning. The ride home from the resort was a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence in the car. The scenic beauty of the mountains felt like a mockery now, a painted backdrop for a play that had ended in tragedy. David didn't look at me, didn't speak. He had made his point with surgical precision at that lunch, and now the operation was over, and I was just left with the raw healing wound. I was naive to think that was the end. The lunch with Leo wasn't the finale. It was merely the climax of the second act. The third act was waiting for us at home. When we pulled into the driveway, something was immediately different. There was a for sale sign planted squarely in our front lawn. It wasn't a generic sign from a realtor. It was a custom, sleek metal post with our address emblazoned on it in a modern, minimalist font. It looked permanent. It looked final. I turned to David, my mouth agape. "What is this?" "Our house is on the market," he said, unlocking the front door as if he'd just commented on the mail arriving. "I've already accepted an offer. A very good one, actually. We have 30 days to vacate." The inside of the house was different, too. It felt hollow. Many of his personal items, the books from his favorite shelf,
The framed blueprint of his first major building, his collection of vintage drafting pencils, were gone. The house we had built together was being systematically dismantled, and he had started without me. "Where are your things?" I asked, my voice small. "In storage," he replied, "and in my new apartment. I signed the lease last week." The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. "You're new, David. What are you doing?" "I'm moving on, Clara," he said, his tone still infuriatingly practical. "The divorce papers are on the kitchen counter. I think you'll find the terms are very fair." He walked to the counter and tapped a manila envelope. "I've been generous with the spousal support, given the circumstances. I didn't want to be cruel. I just wanted to be free." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of sheer, unadulterated shock. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a corporate takeover. He had assessed the assets, planned the exit strategy, and executed it with flawless timing. But what about me? Where am I supposed to go? What about us? 15 years, David. He finally looked at me then. A long, steady look that seemed to see all the way through to the hollow core of me. "There is no us, Clara. There hasn't been for a long time. You made sure of that. My only role after that was to make sure you understood the consequences, truly understood them." He walked to the back door and whistled. Barney came trotting in from the garden, his tail wagging. David knelt down and ruffled his fur. A genuine, tender moment that was the first real emotion I'd seen from him in months. He clipped a leash onto Barney's collar. "What are you doing with Barney?" I asked, a new panic seizing me. "He's coming with me," David said, standing up. "The new apartment has a dog park. It's part of the reason I chose it. I've already spoken to the vet and transferred all his records into my name." "You can't take my dog," I cried, the words tearing out of me. Barney was my comfort, my constant companion during my work-from-home days. He was our dog. He corrected softly, "And given your current instability and the fact that you'll need to find new employment and housing, it's in his best interest to be with me. It's all outlined in the paperwork. My lawyer thought of everything." And that was the masterstroke, the final, perfect twist of the knife. He wasn't just taking the house, the future, the past. He was taking the one innocent, loving creature in all of this. He was taking the daily, silent comfort I had relied on. He walked to the door, Barney at his side. He didn't look back with anger or triumph. He just looked resolved. "I'll have movers come for the rest of my things next week. Goodbye, Clara." The door closed with a soft, definitive click. I stood alone in the kitchen of the house that was no longer mine, the divorce papers feeling like a lead weight on the counter. The revenge was complete. It wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, legal, and utterly devastating. He had taken my lover and humiliated him. He had taken my home and sold it. He had shredded my security, and finally, he had taken my dog. I slid down the cabinet onto the cold tile floor, the silence of the empty house pressing in on me. I had wanted excitement, color, drama. I got it. I was the star of a devastating tragedy, and David had been the brilliant, ruthless director. He hadn't destroyed me in a fit of rage. He had simply, calmly, and methodically dismantled the life I had betrayed, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of it but me, alone on the floor, finally understanding the true cost of my boredom. The revenge was not in making me hate him. It was in finally seeing myself.